More questions, dialogue. Hello.
Hi, I'm Nancy Wadsworth. I teach political science here at DU, and I really needed and appreciated this talk. It fed me a lot, coming out of a lot of teaching on race and gender, politics of race and gender in the U.S. and comparatively, and also I'm teaching a class on political forgiveness, which resonates with the stuff you're talking about, healing trauma. I'd love to hear more about the way you were using the term accountability in the context of your pedagogy. I know what that means in mine, but I'd like to hear more. I think there are dimensions there that maybe you can elaborate.
Well, when I'm talking about accountability, I'm talking about all of us knowing our own social locations. Our race, class, gender, sexuality, nationality, language, ability to, that whole, the complexity of our identities that Dee spoke about so beautifully in her poem. And so many of those are things that are not immediately visible. So I ask people to write cards on their first day, name, address, but also their social location. So right off the bat, they'd write as many as possible, and then that gets longer. And then with all of those aspects of our identities is a piece of accountability, right? It's the whole privilege oppression piece. But it goes beyond that, because I think we can get stuck in this language that doesn't end up meaning much, because it's saying, well, how does regionalism impact? One of the things we do is a class line, where I ask people to line up according to class, from the most owning class to the most working class, by talking with each other. Because they have to actually get up and go network with each other and then find out, and we know class is way much more than income. It's also what, I mean, I don't know how many of you, I never knew this thing called vacations. Vacations, being raised by a single vacations, what, anyway, so those are, it's like vacations, extracurricular stuff, what kinds of schools, this whole long thing, and everybody goes through those, and then they put themselves in line, and it's very interesting to see how quickly people know where they generally need to go, even though we're taught we live in a classless society and we're taught not to talk about it, right? And this is something I've thought about for a long time. How come we don't tell each other our incomes? Who does that really protect? I know it's like not proper, it's not polite, but when we're not telling each other our incomes, what are we really saying? Anyway, so they have to talk about their class of origin the first 12 years. And they get in a line, and then they kind of they do among each other. Well, I was this. Well, I grew up in a, in a trailer. Well, I grew up in, and then so after that, it's basically 3 groups. And the working class group, they stay together. They start to huddle. And even if there's differentiation among them, they are a unit. The owning class students over here, they start to like, ooh. They don't know how to, they're not used to like naming each other, right? That's the accountability piece, because then we go through and each person says who they are in this line and what they need to do to be allies to the people in the other part of the line, right? And you can kind of predict this, that the working class students start to get angry because they see, hey, this was a setup. And most of the working class students are going to be students of color, and it's visible there, right? And they're the immigrants, the recent immigrants, okay? And the owning class students have to hear that anger. And then they also start to need to see how they got to where they got in their lives, because they hear it from the other students. So things come up like, well, it was just luck of the draw. And the working class students, they start to get attitude, because we don't allow people to really congregate according to class and name it that way. So this is what I mean about accountability. We name ourselves in relationship to the community that we're in. And the logic behind that is, if we can figure out how to be a community with each other in this relatively safe environment, not that the classroom is safe for everybody, I've never bought into that nonsense, nor should it be really. But if we can do that here, maybe we can do that in a bigger place. That's one example of accountability. Yes. Your name, please. Say who you are.
My name is Michelle Stone, and I teach a whole bunch of different sociology classes at Michigan College. And I've been at a variety of institutions of higher education also, and I'm impressed with your career. And I really like your message.
Thank you.
My question question is this. Universities and colleges are busy. So how do you handle the administration who must think you're a flake?
A flake. Well, tenure helps. You know, we need tenure to protect just even First Amendment. But, well, okay, I teach a course called Poetry and Politics, 21st Century Voices of Conscience. And there are 20 books on the syllabus, because we read a book of poetry and then a memoir or autobiography by that poet, so that people have a better sense about where the poetry is coming from. So it's hard to kind of call that class a flake. I teach critical race legal theory, which is an extraordinary area that I just fell into and then thought, oh my God, this would, you know, I teach multiracial feminist, national, transnational, diasporic feminist theory. So these are heavy-duty courses with a lot of books and a lot of writing. So it's hard, I think, that helps to protect against the flake piece. But the other thing is, the truth is that I don't really talk. In many places I have taught, I don't really talk to my colleagues about what I do, because I have been marginalized and I have been labeled, and it's very damaging. It is. I don't want to. I mean, there was one point where I was called into the dean. You know Patricia Williams' book, The Alchemy of Race and Rights, the diary of a law professor. She tells a lot of things about what happened to her as an African-American woman law professor. And, you know, getting called to the dean, getting letters, you know, students who feel quite entitled to write to the president. They don't even, or, you know, I've been in some settings where the chair of the department becomes Big Daddy, and he wants to, like, solve everything, and they don't send the students to me. I don't get to speak for myself, and I have to interrupt that and say, excuse me, but you need to send, you know. So but there was one time when I was called into the dean, and if I had not had a leave of absence that next semester because I had a double book contract, I would have needed to take a leave of absence just to get myself mentally straight again. Not straight, I don't mean straight, but you know what I mean. Because I am a multitarian, I am not straight. Anyway, but so I don't want to, it has been, sometimes it's been incredible, and I know a lot of us have stories of this, and we don't talk about the stories necessarily about beaten up. I remember one time that I was really like following my finger along the walls to get from one, because I was so shaken by what, you know. The academy is not a healing place. It's like you don't want to go to the hospital when you're sick, because you know that's where people are sick and die, right? And I feel that way about the academy. It's a location of small minds. Not across the board, but it's not healthy to only have academic connections. And also, in terms of class, how boring is that? More. Oh.
Sorry. Dr. Thompson is going to be hanging around for a little while on the second floor lobby. The bookstore is there, has her books, and she would be very happy to talk with you more and sign them, and really appreciate you being here, Dr.
Thank you very much.